Judy Moody gets famous. Chapter 7, Body Parts. So, which one of you is the patient? Asked the tall man with a red beard and a long white coat. Frank held up his little blue sausage of a finger. Ouch, said the man. How'd this happen? Frank looked over at Judy. Judy stared a hole in the carpet. We were playing, Frank answered. There's a picture. They all look scared. We were making a human centipede so my sister could be famous, said Stink. And she stepped on Frank. Judy sent Stink her best troll eyes stare, completed with a stinging caterpillar eyebrows. Aw, man, laughed. The man laughed. Okay, well, I'm Ron. I'm an emergency room nurse. I'll take you back, and the doctor's gonna fix you right up, Frank. Is your mom or dad here? My mom went to call Frank's mom, said Judy. Okay, tell you what. The children's wing is right through those red doors. Why don't you two wait in the playroom there? It'll be more fun. I'll tell your mom you're there when she comes back. Too bad Rocky went home. Now she was stuck with Stink. They pushed through the red doors into a long hallway. At the end of the hall was a room marked the Magic Playroom. Judy and Stink went in. The walls were papered with teddy bears in hospital gowns holding balloons. Each bear had crutches or bandages or sat in a wheelchair. There was a couch, a table with crayons, and paper for coloring, a plastic castle, and a bookshelf with books about going to the hospital. There was even a miniature operating table on wheels. The only kid in the playroom was a girl in a wheelchair. How come you're in a wheelchair? Stink asked her. Stink, you shouldn't ask stuff like that. It's okay, said the girl. I got a new heart. They can't let me walk around yet. They have to keep me at the hospital for a long, long time to make sure it works. A whole new heart? Wow, said Stink. What's wrong with your old one? Stink, said Judy, even though she wanted to know too. It broke, I guess, said the girl. Were you scared? Judy asked. The girl nodded. Guess what? My scar goes from my neck all the way down to my belly button. What is your name? Asked Stink. Laura, said the girl. That's one brave heart you got there, Laura, said Judy. Daddy says I'm a brave girl. Laura said, I'm getting a hamster when I go home. Do you have a hamster? No, said Judy. I have a cat named Mouse. There's nothing to do here, said Laura, looking around. They have doctor stuff, said Judy. There's Laura in her wheelchair. Look, a real sling and stuff, said Stink. Kneeling next to a big cardboard box, he pulled out ace bandages, boxes of gauze, and tongue depressors, even a stethoscope, and a pair of crutches. Stink, I can put your arm in a sling. Stink, can I put your arm in a sling? Judy asked. No way, said Stink. How about you, Laura? I know how, for real. I'm sick of doctor stuff, Laura said. What about dolls? Stink asked. There's a bunch of dolls in this box. They all have broken arms and legs, or no heads, Laura said. And some of them have cancer. What do you mean? Asked Judy. They're bald, said Sarah. In my same room. That's not fair, said Judy. They should have at least dolls to play with that aren't sick. The nurse came back just then. Time to go back to your room, she told Laura. Did you kids meet our brave girl? Yes, said Judy and Stink. I hope your new heart works great, said Judy as Laura left with the nurse. Bye, called Stink. Judy looked through the doll box. Laura was right. All the dolls were dirty or broken or hairless or headless. There's a picture. Mrs. Moody poked her head in the doorway. Hello. Mom, said Stink. Is Frank okay? Judy asked. His finger's broken, said Mrs. Moody. But his mom is with him now. He's getting a splint. Rare. A real splint? Said Judy. He won't be playing any basketball for a while, but he's going to be just fine. So, ready to go? Stink and Judy followed Mrs. Moody out of the playroom. Halfway down the hall, Judy stopped, holding Stink back by his shirt. Stink, she said, so her mom couldn't hear. Give me your backpack. What? Your backpack. I need it. Stink made a face and handed over the pack. Catch up with Mom and tell her I forgot something. I'll be right back. Judy dashed back to the playroom and over to the box of broken dolls, looking around to make sure no one was coming. She stuffed the dolls into the backpack. Judy zipped it shut. She flung it over her shoulder with a lumpy Santa Claus sack and headed back down the hall. When Mom stopped to ask a question at the desk, Stink said, Hey, what's in there? Nothing. Nothing does not feel like a big fat lump. Did you take that doctor stuff? You took stuff? You stole? I'm telling. Shh. You can't tell anybody, Stink, or we'll get into trouble for stealing. You mean you'll get into trouble, said Stink. Are you crazy? Do you want to get famous for being the only third grader who ever went to jail? Swear you won't tell her, Stink? What will you give me? I'll let you look at real spit under my microscope. Okay, I swear. You swore, said Judy. I'm telling. That is the end of chapter 7, Broken Parts. I'm also going to read chapter 8, Body Parts. Body parts. As soon as Judy got home, she unloaded the backpack and spread the dolls out on her bottom bunk. She, Dr. Judy Moody, was in an operating mood. On her bed was a doll that didn't talk or cry anymore, and one with no arms. There was a headless doll and one that was bald. First, Judy gave each of the dolls a bath. I know just what I need, said Judy. Body parts. She dug out of her collection long arms, skinny arms, brown legs, pink legs, middles with belly buttons, one bare foot, a thing that looked like a neck, and all sorts of heads, small heads, fat heads, Barbie heads, bald heads. Judy emptied a whole bag of body parts into her bed. Rare. Judy glued a red wig with yarn braids onto a doll with no hair and gave another one arms that bent. Judy bent the arm back and forth to test it. Boo! Said the doll each time Judy lifted her arm. You don't scare me, Judy told the doll. And for you, she said to the headless doll. A new head. From all the heads on her bed, Judy chose one with brown hair and green eyes. There you go, said Judy, popping on the new head. But when she turned the doll upside down to put some shoes on her, the doll's head flew off and bounced across the floor. Whoa, said Judy, running after the head. That won't work. Let's try this one. How would you like eyes that can close and open? Judy twisted a new head onto the doll's neck and waved her up and down through the air a few times to watch her eyes open and close. Voila, said Judy. She kissed the doll right on the nose. Mwah! Next, she dressed each doll in a blue and white hospital gown she made from an old sheet and gave each one of them a paper bracelet printed with a name. Colby, Molly, Susanna, Laura. Knock, knock, called Stink, pounding on the door. Go away, said Judy. Knock, knock, said Stink. Who's there? Said Judy. I, Stink, said Stink. I stink who? I stink you should let me in your room, said Stink, letting himself in anyways. How'd you like that knock-knock joke? He peeked behind the blanket hanging over the bottom bunk. Arrgh, he yelled, jumping back in shock. Those dolls! The hospital! You stole! Those aren't. If Mom and Dad find out. Stink, you promised you wouldn't tell. Yeah, but Judy was making a tiny cast out of oogie wet paper. Look, if you keep quiet, I'll let you help me. It's a deal, said Stink. Stink and Judy finished up putting the cast on one of the doll's legs. When it dried, they painted it white and signed it with lots of made-up names. After that, they made a sling for another doll with a scrap of cloth. On a different doll, Dr. Judy put tattoo Band-Aids from her Band-Aid collection all over its legs and arms. And stomach. Double cool, said Stink. Last but not least was a rag doll made of cloth. Judy took a pink marker and drew a scar from the doll's neck to her belly button. Then she drew a red heart broken in two. With black thread, she stitched the broken heart back together, hiding it under the doll's hospital gown. Oh, wow. Why do you think she did that? Just like the girl Laura, said Stink. When she was finished, Judy propped up all the dolls in a row on her bottom bunk and stood back to admire her work. She set her own doll, Hedda Get Better, next to them. Wow, you made them look really good, said Stink. A little later, Judy packed all the dolls into a box and secretly mailed them back to the hospital without a return address. No one would ever know that she was the one who had stolen the dolls. It's like a real hospital, a real doll hospital, thought Judy. She, Judy Moody, was on her way to being just like the first woman doctor, Elizabeth Blackwell. There's all the dolls. And that is the end of chapter Body Parts, which I believe is chapter 8. See you tomorrow for chapter 9.